Welcome back to Contact. We are here with Cici Robinson, current CIF director, former athletic director at El Camino High School and Folsom High School, and former high school coach of volleyball and basketball. Cici, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
So take us through your background as a coach. How did you end up coaching? What was the process of you landing your first job and any subsequent jobs related to athletics?
I can give you the Reader's Digest version, and that is graduated from college, and I started off wanting to be a sports broadcaster. I thought that was going to be the greatest job on the planet, and then quickly realized that that is very difficult. Took a job in advertising, and within a few months realized it was not for me. And my best day there was babysitting our graphic designer's kids. And I came home and thought, I'm in the wrong spot. I need to be a teacher. I need to be around kids. This is my happy place. And thought back on my best memories. And I loved everything about high school. I was obviously a student athlete, but I just stayed involved, felt really connected, had great experiences and growth experiences that were not great, but great lessons to be learned, and thought, I want to give that same experience and the same ability for the next generation to feel the same way. So quickly went into the credential program, and as I was getting my teaching credential, got a job as the on-site supervisor. They don't have those anymore, but it was where all the bad kids were sent when they got in trouble, but not in so much trouble that they needed to be suspended. They just basically needed a timeout at a Title I school in Sacramento. And the other part was I was willing to coach anything. They said, can you coach varsity volleyball? Sure. Can you coach basketball? Sure. I didn't know how to say no, so that worked out very well for them. And so I ran the on-site program while I was getting my credential, and I coached and learned a whole lot of things about classroom management and coaching and preparedness and what a program that's lacking continuity looks like, and what I wanted to make sure that I was a part of long-term later. So fast forward, finished student teaching and getting my credential, and interviewed at my alma mater, which was El Camino High School in Sacramento. My former principal interviewed me and basically said, I bleed green and want to do the things that I can to make this place better. And I was lucky enough to unofficially be hired on the spot and ready to coach. And within 2 days, I think I was at practice, and my former basketball coach was having me watch varsity practice and telling me to evaluate players. And I was pretending to be cool, calm, and collected, but inside I was, trying not to freak out about the whole experience, and really enjoyed the next 8 years of soaking everything in that I possibly could as a PE teacher, surrounded by people that I had admired and looked up to and been mentored by, and kind of figured out my path of watching what they did and where I felt like I could fit in best when they were going to step aside, and how I could continue to help the school and be a bigger part and still remain true to myself, which I think was really important, because while I had these incredible mentors, I also knew that what they did wasn't always what I knew I was capable of. So it was just a really great experience. And after coaching basketball for quite a few years, I realized that I thought I could be a great athletic director. And even though our current athletic director, who was retiring, tried everything to talk me out of it, he told me I was crazy. Mm-hmm. I just really thought it was the right place for me. And I loved it and thought, yeah, this is exactly where I belong the whole time. And so, sorry, quickly, that experience of being the athletic director opened up so many other doors that I didn't even know existed. I hardly knew what the CIF was when I started coaching, and to be working for them now, feels like a very fortunate place to have landed. And yeah, I just feel lucky.
So I want to come back to that a little bit later in the pod, because I remember when you were going through the decision-making process of moving from one job to another, and then from that job to another one. So I'd like to revisit that. But initially in response to your first steps into the coaching world. What was it like when you set foot on the court as the head coach? And what did you suddenly realize that you needed to figure out?
No matter how many practices you have before your first game, there's no way to prepare for everything that they're going to need to know in that small time frame. So it was really a matter of decompressing after games, taking notes quickly so that I could remember, here's what we did well, here's what we need to work on, here's the road or the path I think we need to go on.
And over that time, as you evolved, right, and you went from the one school to your alma mater, and you got thrown right into the fire, and if I remember correctly, you were coaching one of the lower level teams, but also relied upon to help with the varsity at times and give feedback to your former coach. In what ways did you work to surround yourself with mentors and pick their brains in relation to how do I improve while I'm just trying to survive?
Yes, so lower level coach, and what I think was so great about that was each year I was kind of given a new crop because they were brand new. They were freshman level in the beginning, and I could improve my craft kind of each year, knowing where I started and where I ended each season and what I thought I could reevaluate and do differently with a whole new group that had no preconceived notions of anything about the school we were from, me as a coach. I was getting a fresh group, and I felt a really strong connection to need to create and prepare them for that next level. And it was an even bigger compliment to the athlete themselves and what I did to help prepare them when they got moved up to varsity from and skipping that JV level. That to me felt like I did the things I was supposed to do, and learning that the wins and losses did not matter, especially at the freshman level. And I think that's something that's really hard for those that have been not only high school athletes, but collegiate athletes, where they've just been trained to compete. We want to compete at all times. And then suddenly realizing that it's not about the wins and losses, it's about where they start and where they finish, and how have you built them, and how much more important that is. I think the wins ended up coming with that, luckily, and it made it continue to be fun for the kids because that matters to them. But I could still say that I was preparing them, which was very important.
Right. And you mentioned that you're preparing them to go to the varsity level. And as part of your initial learning experience at your first school, you mentioned earlier that you learned what it was like to be in a program that lacked consistency, for a better word. I don't remember exactly what was said. And to go to one that had consistency. And if you could capture, to the extent that you can remember, that feeling and the tangibles, what were the key parts of the culture that led to the different experience and the consistency or not?
So I think the lack of consistency was interesting when it was just there was not pre-coaches meetings. There was not a handbook given that says, here are the things that I expect them to learn. Here's the offense that they are going to run at the varsity level, and here's what I need them to run at the JV level. There was none of that. So I was really relying on my old information and my old plays and things like that to use to try to teach them. And I think it was a disservice to those girls because they were going to move up at some point and have to learn everything over again. Fast forward to going to a program that was extensive and had been around for a long time. There was handbooks, there was meetings, there was multiple offenses, multiple defenses, multiple presses, all the out of bounds plays. And while it was at this level for varsity, I could at least put it at this level for freshmen and JV. So it meant that the learning curve was this big instead of this big, and it made it coaching easier for the coaches when they got them. It made it easier for the players because they weren't starting at 0, they were starting at 5. And it just made the things that you could focus on next, that much more advanced.
So this one's going to be a little bit out of left field, and the only reason I know this is because I was there when you were doing this. What was it like to be the only or one of few female on an all-male staff?
I think thankfully I was maybe young enough and naive enough to not pay attention to that so much,
Mm-hmm.
and attribute to them
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't treat me differently.
Mm-hmm.
So you either got it or you didn't get it, and that was all that mattered. It wasn't you were necessarily a former player of ours and we're going to treat you a certain way. It was, you need to be quick, you need to be paying attention, and you need to see it once and be able to teach the next group. Mm-hmm. So it was a lot of trial by fire. It was a lot of lunchtime conversations in the staff room with mustard and ketchup packets, and him breaking things down because I'm like, you said that in 2 minutes and I had no idea what you meant, right, but you wanted me to teach the girls. Right. So, I mean, I think I'm going to say that was one of the few times that I didn't necessarily feel like my gender was even paid attention to in the best way possible. Right. I think that the people that paid attention to my gender the most were the officials, actually. Mm. And my assistant coach was a well-established college professor who had been a part of the program forever. Mm. And he taught me so much, but it would be warm-ups and game getting ready to start. And the official every time would go walk up to him and say, Coach, where's your lineup? Introduce themselves. And he would say, no, it's her. Mm. And they would say, oh, okay, sorry. And we all used to wear polo shirts and jeans or khakis and coach the games. And so I quickly realized, all right, if I dress differently, then they realize, all right, she wouldn't be wearing a professional outfit if she weren't the head coach. Mm. And as stupid as that seems, it really did change things. And as soon as I walked in with a professional attire, they did come to me first because they just assumed that. I used it to my advantage, and my husband made fun of me forever because I would stomp my heel a lot. Mm-hmm. My voice blended, so I'd be screaming for a timeout and nobody would listen. But if I stomped my heel, everybody thought I was crazy, and they'd pay attention. I'd get my timeout real quick. So it worked out.
Awesome. So as you decided, it was time to move into that role that Coach encouraged us to run away from as quickly as we can and become an athletic administrator, and then later on deciding to leave and go to another school in the same capacity. What was the thought process, and what did you take with you from your journey, right? As a coach, as a teacher, and now you're going into athletic administration, which is basically like starting over as a head coach, figuring out, well, what do I need to learn? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I liked that I could at least say I had walked in their footsteps. I knew what it felt like to coach. I knew what it felt like to have confrontation with parents. I knew what it felt like to have conversations that were not always comfortable with other coaches, with officials. I knew what it felt like to write a practice plan, to say that end of the year speech that was emotional and heartfelt. I just felt like I could relate to coaches and empathize with not only the good but the bad, and offer my experience and opinions. And I thought that was a positive becoming an athletic director.
And through that experience, and now stepping away from the school site completely and going to the CIF, where you're in a different role, if you were to go back and drop back to the school site, just pick random school, what would you do differently as an athletic administrator if you went back as an AD?
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that there's anything I do different, because I think each year I was learning different things. I think open lines of communication are very important. I mean, they're the biggest thing you could possibly do. I think that making sure that your coaches feel valued is really important, and supported. Those pieces, they're not doing it for the money. There's no money involved in coaching high school sports. And as long as they're feeling like when something goes left or right, there's somebody that has their back and will support them, they're going to continue to be a part of it, because they're doing it for the kids first.
Right.
And I think I would just really make sure that the little things didn't weigh them down or take away from their true passion, which is kids in the sport.
Mm-hmm. And would you say that that same idea and thought of making your coaches feel valued plays out as a coach with their athletes? And can you use similar ideas and thoughts as you've evolved as a coach over the years?
I think that if an athlete feels valued and feels important, they will do almost anything for a coach. And I think that's a powerful thing to have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important that coaches are making sure that they're using that power appropriately,
Mm-hmm.
that they're teaching life lessons when there are life lessons to be taught, that they are helping to guide these young minds that are still developing and are overwhelmed with so many things, whether it's emotions or physical things going on or just outside issues, just making sure that they feel like they're in a safe space and they feel valued and a part of something important that they'll remember for a long time.
And what I'd like to know is when you go into a place that has a culture that from the outside looking in is very predicated on success in regards to wins and losses, and you've always been grounded in the core values of what's best for kids, and how do you marry those, and what were the challenges that you faced going into a situation like that?
I think when you first walk in and you're just kind of trying to evaluate a program or seeing what they're about, is talking to the kids, asking them about their experience, asking them, it's got to be little questions. If you ask a blatant question, I think that they'll give you the answer they think you want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's just kind of quiet observations and paying attention to what that team is about, and do they come back after they graduate? Do they want to be a part of the coaches' lives afterwards? How many of them are still in contact with coaches that they played for? I think that tells you a lot. And those that kind of go their way, this was a small part of their large plan that maybe didn't leave the footprint that you're hoping a program that you're a part of leaves.
Mm-hmm. Were there anything that you saw or experienced in either of your stops at a school, or all three of your stops at different school sites, that had the largest impact that you were able to steal and reapply later on, right, in regards to a ripple effect in the culture of a team, of a program, of a school, observing a practice, and you're just like, oh, I need to take that and use that?
I think consistency, watching coaches that are consistent, that does a lot for kids, and they want to know where they stand. They want to know that they can count on you, because if you're creating these rules and parameters that you want them to be a part of, making sure that you're holding yourself to that same standard, it makes it really easy to say, you can't miss practice if you never miss practice as a coach.
Mm-hmm.
And just creating kind of that atmosphere that make kids want to be a part of it,
Mm-hmm.
that's really big. But it's consistent fairness, communication, and reliability. To me, those are really important characteristics that I take away not only as a coach, but as an employee, all things that I think are valued.
And we mentioned this earlier, and you said that you were maybe too young and naive to notice it and appreciated it for what it was at the time, but also mentioned that the only time in your career where gender didn't play into things in your role, especially within athletics and administration. In what way would you say that that was a challenge that ultimately made you better, but also caused, some issues over the years for you as you tried to establish your mark in the community?
I think I just slowly started to pay attention to looking around and realizing that there weren't a lot of people that looked like me in a room.
Mm-hmm.
And what did that mean to me? It didn't mean feel bad for me. And it didn't mean necessarily that I should get more than anybody else. It just meant that I needed to be more prepared. I needed to be just really on my game at all times so that I could speak up intelligently. I could listen to the messages that were being sent out, and I could show that just because I may have looked different didn't mean that I was different. And it also meant that I was going to try to find anybody that was kind of in a similar boat to me and start to build a network. Mm-hmm. Even if I didn't know them, I was going to tap them on the shoulder mm-hmm. and introduce myself and figure out ways to find common ground and a conversation to start. And then the next thing you know, 2 turned into 3, 3 turned into 5. And then every time you walked into a room where you may not have been in the majority, you could certainly find someone that would give you that level of comfort and felt like you belonged and you wouldn't miss a beat.
So once you got to the CIF and you've been there, well, we're going on 3 years now, right? I think
this is my 4th year.
4th year. Wow. Time flies. And you were then able to spend much more time observing rather than being in the trenches, right? With your hands in the mix of culture and those things. What would you say, or what would you offer to coaches in general as the best advice, just being an observer of a lot of different sports and a lot of different coaches over the last 4 years at the state level, fielding calls, all of the things that come with your job? If you could, consolidate it down to a few sound bites of, hey, if you can focus on X, Y, and Z, you're going to have a long, productive career and feel very fulfilled.
That's a lot in a small sound bite, but I think first of all, find your people. Find people that not only might be in the same generation era as you, but find people that are in an older generation because they have so much incredible knowledge. It's not even funny. But then also find people in the generation below you and help be that mentor. So it really should be this paying it forward sort of situation. Absorbing and then paying it forward, I think, is really important. I also think coaches get stuck on their own sport and not seeing past that tunnel vision of here's what I'm involved in. And really, I think I learned the most things from the sports and the coaches that I had the least in common with, because maybe I listened to them with a different filter, but they just gave me different nuggets of information that I thought, wow, if you just tweak that a little bit, it applies to me. If you just turn this slightly this way, I could really use a lot of the things that they're doing. And I could realize that there are so many wheels out there that don't need to be reinvented. And I think I would tell people to broaden their spectrum of what they're looking at for information and advice.
Yeah, that's great advice. Eddie and I were talking earlier about needing somebody near you that is your truth teller, especially mm-hmm. when you're younger and you're not necessarily willing or seeking out those truths. Yeah, that's really helpful.
That's huge.
Yeah, and I thought so as well when he brought it up, because in the way in which he framed it, it was really important. Because as much as you think you have all the answers, the other thing we talked about is as we get older, we realize we don't have any, and we're more willing to seek out advice as the more experienced we get, which is fascinating. But hopefully,
so true.
Yeah, and that's hopefully what this will do, right? This will give people some advice and maybe let them see behind the curtain. And so you've been out of coaching per se for a while, but athletic administration and even at the CIF office and the things you deal with there is coaching. Teaching is coaching, right? Coaching is teaching. How has your approach changed over the years, right? If you were dropped back in the classroom, if all of a sudden you had to go back to your alma mater and be the head girls basketball coach, how would that look different than it did, 15 years ago?
I think that I would sweat way less of the small stuff. I think that you choose very strange battles, if not everything's a battle when you're younger. Whether it's a bad traveling call by a referee that you're never going to change their opinion, so why are you arguing it? But you couldn't have told me that in the beginning. I was going to argue it and somehow think I was going to get it back and a call down the road. I think I would be calmer. I think that I would be more open to information and criticism. It doesn't mean that I'm going to be walked all over. It means that I'm going to be prepared, but I'm going to also be more retrospective on things and outcomes, and really paying attention to what the kids need, because what they needed 20 years ago is very different than what they needed 10 years ago, which is very different than what they need now. And I think in education, we took a long time to realize that there are different ways of teaching. And I think that that's maybe one of the most difficult things that I saw as a teacher and a coach. People really get settled in on what worked for them for a long time, that they don't see that they could continue to be successful without feeling like they're selling out who they are. They're just adapting. And I think I would be more adaptable. And I took that just from teaching the beginning. Everything was yes or no, very black or very white. And it was just what I was taught and felt like I needed to continue to teach. And then I realized every kid has a story. Every story is different. And I want to see them be successful in whatever light that looks like. And it's going to be a lot more work. But I also think that the future is going to be a lot better if people just kind of adjust a little bit, give and take, figure it out.
Yeah. And that's really hard when you're dealing with teenagers, right? So we both have teenage kids in the house, and we've spent the majority of our life teaching and coaching teenagers. And to your point of black and white and gray, you know, that's another thing Eddie echoed, which is hilarious knowing him, right? It was, you know, the answer is it depends most of the time. And that's really hard for people that are wired, you know, at their root level with, no, it's this or that, instead of embracing the power of and, right? And then as a teenager, they have a really tough time holding that two things can seem to be opposites, but both be true. And that's one of the biggest things that I think I've struggled as a parent to convey to my children. And at the same time, that's the reality of the world, right? And how do you deal with that? And how do you use, you know, athletics to learn those lessons? I'm going to ask one more question that is more loaded, and we'll see where it goes. But as you navigate the journey with an extremely talented child who's playing collegiate athletics, and you're now in the role of a parent, and you've also been in the other role of coach and athletic administrator, and seeing how that journey is navigated and what's real and what's not, and what's put out there that many parents subscribe to because it's the loudest voice talking versus the reality as you've experienced it. You know, what do you have to offer, if anything, for families and parents and athletes that want to really know what's that process like? What are the most important things to take care of? And what's the noise that you can just tune out?
I think I'm trying to learn to be patient with the process, to be patient with my child's growth. It can be really exciting one minute because he has 7 different schools talking to him, and then it could be really quiet the next minute because they haven't returned texts, or maybe had an outing that didn't garner the same interest. So it's really like this for them because they're riding this crazy roller coaster, and it's really my job is trying to stay as much like this as I possibly can, and make sure he knows that we're here no matter what, and to be patient. Yes, it's a big decision, but in the end, it may not even be the right decision after that first year. And you can change your mind if you need to. It doesn't mean that you're a failure. It doesn't mean anything. It means this is what growth looks like. And trying to be as encouraging as I possibly can, but also knowing that he's only hearing about every 5th word that I say. And even if I have all the answers, he doesn't want to hear them from me. And I'm hoping that somebody else is saying something similar, and that the coaches that he's chosen to communicate with and trust are telling him something similar in whatever filter makes him hear it better. Because I can remember as a coach, moms would come up to me all the time and talk about how difficult their teenage daughters were. And I would say, I'm happy to be your secret squirrel. Mm-hmm. Whatever it is you want them to hear, tell me, and I will tell them, and they'll think it was a genius idea. Yep. So I'm hoping somebody else is telling him the genius ideas that I've been telling him for the last 5 years, but he didn't want to hear it.
Exactly. And I think that's what the power of community, especially in schools, is. And how do you surround yourself and your kids with other people that can deliver a message that you might not be the best messenger for at any given point. Well, Cici, thank you for being with us this evening. I appreciate you taking the time. A lot of great nuggets that will hopefully serve people well on their journey.
This was fun. I enjoyed it, and I hope you don't have to spend too many hours editing all the things I said.
Not at all. Talk soon.
All right. Talk to you later.